saying this year they just don't see how the charade can go on. But I've seen it get pushed back. I mean, I remember Roberts, when folks thought 3 years ago it was going to implode, he said, no, I'd give it 3-4 years. Well, we're 3-4 years later. And I just don't know how they square putting ISIS in charge, giving them $10 billion, letting them launch attacks on Assad, and now we've got to go fight ISIS, but then they're caught giving them airdrops of weapons. I think fighting ISIS is the cover for bombing Assad's forces. In fact, Obama has said we need to take Assad out. That's why ISIS got a foothold. No, ISIS got a foothold because our government put them in there. And this has really woken the military up. So what I'm getting at here is I don't see how this agenda can continue on. But as you said 3 years ago, it always continues on historically longer than we think. But then overnight, sometimes these empires based on lies fall, or it could die slowly, or it could, I guess, take the planet over if everyone submits to it. So, Dr. Roberts, for about 5 minutes, you've got the floor, and I'll let you go. Finish up with your global perspectives and where you see this going.
Well, I think that what's working against the neoconservatives is their neglect of the economy. And so they're so focused on world power and on the financial hegemony of the United States that they're not paying attention to the fact that the economy itself is expiring. And there's no growth in consumer incomes. There's no good jobs for people, not even for university graduates. The workforce is shrinking in size because of the lack of jobs. The debt continues to build. At some point, debt has to be serviced. It can't be. So I think they're overlooking the economic landmines while they are greedily chasing after power. And so this is the hope that the economy blows up and they have no way to deal with it. You have to keep in mind that leadership passes into empire, and empire begets insolence, and insolence brings ruin. And when you see the United States, which has now a very weak economy, challenging both Russia and China in some sort of world supremacy contest that neither Russia nor China had any interest in being part of. But this combination of Russia and China is simply too much for the neoconservatives, given the weakened state of the United States economy. So I think it is true that this could be the year that all of this blows up in their faces, despite the success that they have just had with the Paris shootings.
What else? I'm just there deep in thought. What else can we do as individuals, Dr. Roberts, from your historical experience and governmental experience, journalistic experience, what can we do to ensure that we don't have a global collapse, that we don't, in their death throes or reaching for ultimate power, all basically get destroyed in a thermonuclear war? I mean, isn't it just that journalists and people in government and media and every other profession out there need to realize how dire our straits are and not just be so comfortable that we just abdicate our responsibility and let a bunch of madmen run the world? I mean, what else can we do to try to ensure this doesn't happen?
Well, there's probably nothing. You know, there are no more independent institutions. I mean, journalism is no longer an independent institution. It's owned by 5 or 6 major companies. They're dependent on the government for the broadcasting licenses. And indeed, this is an old hat type thing. Ever since the Cold War, journalists have said that they have to be on the side of the government, or otherwise they're not patriotic, and that they are patriotic, and so they take the government's side. You know, just the other day, the New York Times editor, or former editor, gave a speech publicly and said that, well, New York Times has to support the government. That's what we do because we're patriotic. And so if we have to mislead the people in order to support the government, we're going to do that. So, where is journalism? They're not part of the picture. It's a ministry of propaganda. All people can do is simply not fall for the government schemes. They have to be aware of it. Now, I don't know what any sort of resistance can come out of that. But as long as people don't believe what they're told, there's more hope than if they do believe what they're told. And I think that's what motivates me.
Sure.
You.
Well, paulcraigroberts.org is the website. It's excellent. We see attempts to censor new independent media. We see attempts to bring in free speech controls because the establishment understands that it is information in the final equation and truth, and people just removing their consent and their financial support from the system that will force it to change. But you're right, the hubris, the insolence is the stuff historically that causes rack and ruin, and I hope we can turn it around. Thank you so much, Dr. Roberts, for joining us.
Pleased to be with you, Alex.
Always great to have you on. paulcraigroberts.org, again, is his site. I'm Alex Jones. Infowars.com and prisonplanet.com are our major sites. Jared is active duty Army and has been holding and wants to give his take on the new poll out showing Obama has only a 15% approval rating in active duty. We'll go to Joe, who's also ex-Army, and Rambo in Oregon, who has family members that are in and wants to give us his take on that. But we've heard unanimously it's not about gays in the military. And I'm not saying that's good for morale or whatever. I'm not endorsing or not endorsing. The point is it's a football issue. The real issue is the corruption, the government drug dealing, the working with radical Islamicists, the training the military for domestic operations, gun confiscation, the open training of ISIS and others. This has got the military really awake. Now, Darren McBreen put together a 5-minute report that's extremely powerful that we only aired part of at the start of the broadcast today. I want to air the whole thing now here for radio and TV viewers. If you're a radio listener, you want to go to Infowars.com/show where you can see the free video feed because it's very powerful to see these congressional testimony pieces, news clips. Now, I want to warn folks, some of the footage is graphic and is violent, but it's documentary in nature. And then we'll go to Jared, Rambo, Joe, and others. Then we've got Harry Dent joining us, who is, again, excellent financial analyst. He predicted a couple years ago on the show that it would be deflation that got us, not inflation. And he predicted the oil going down, the demographic cliff, all of it. It's now happening. So he's going to be joining us, and we'll take your phone calls in the second half of the interview. But here's one of the most powerful pieces that Darren McBreen has put out so far, of many powerful pieces. We're blessed to have such a great crew of people like Jakari Jackson and Darren McBreen and Rob Dew and John Bound and so many others, Rob Jacobson, the list goes on, that put out these video montage reports. So here is one right now, the bloody laundry of the CIA.
I appeared before the Congressional Committee, the highest representation of the American people, under subpoena to tell what I knew of activities which I believe might lead to an attempt to set up a fascist dictatorship.
Does America owe its edge in military technology to Nazi war criminals brought here after World War II?
The truth is that thousands of former Nazis, some of whom committed atrocities, went to work for the United States government.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks? This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
We're really talking about intelligence at the highest levels of the U.S. government, setting the broad direction for the nation.
Have you brought with you some of those devices which would have enabled the CIA to use this poison for,
We have indeed, for killing people
But also the toxin itself would not appear in the autopsy? Yes.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
If you've been anywhere near a television set or a radio these past few hours, you already know that John Lennon of the Beatles is dead. He was shot late this evening in front of his apartment building in New York City.
Despite evidence that Noriega was involved in drug trafficking, Bush kept Noriega on the payroll.
We interrupt your regular programming to tell you of a plane crash in northeastern Minnesota, where we have just had confirmed a short while ago 8 people were killed on a small beach aircraft that was on its way to Eveleth, Minnesota, including Senator Paul Wellstone of Minnesota. And according to the senior staff in the senator's office, not only the senator, but his wife Sheila, his daughter, 3 members of his staff, and the 2 pilots.
The CIA has been and is now completely out of control.
The accusation is that drugs are being